them too, right? So tell them that story. Let them know that you understand that they're having to address really increasing levels of change. The pace and the complexity is going crazy, right? That they're trying to strategically plan what they're going to be doing over the course of the next 5 years, that they know that there's going to be technology shifts, that they're looking for business continuity and stay in business initiatives, that they're looking at how to really leverage and develop their workforce. And they know that they're going to have, if the last 2 years haven't taught us anything, unplanned disruptions. We've had COVID, we've had wildfires, we've had ice storms, we've had everything you can imagine thrown at us. And so it's likely to continue on in the future. And then being able to share with them the fact that really the research shows that you get a quicker adoption, faster return on their investment when change practitioners are there to help identify the impacts on people and develop mitigation strategies for them. And then that assessing the organizational change capacity. What's the bandwidth of the folks that are actually going to have to implement the change? What's the number of changes that they're having to deal with? Maybe not even from one single initiative, but from many. We all are right now experiencing that with changes to the 365 environment, and some folks are getting Outlook and Word, Microsoft products for the first time in our organizations, and we're learning how to use MS Teams, right? And we're shifting to SharePoint Online, and oh my gosh, Workday. And yes, there's also things like payroll that's coming, and oh yeah, Organ buys. So these are all some things that are just coming up for us all in the future, that in addition to the work that's on our individual plates, that we'll also be needing to support. And they're also going to impact every single one of the folks that may be trying to implement your specific projects. So really identifying how those timelines and other drivers like that really impact the organization's ability to be resilient, to be able to address and deal with the changes that come along. So next slide. I just wanted to kind of talk about the change management office placement. So there's different ways in which you can go. You could certainly have a separate office that's not linked to any specific area of the organization, and it's designed to really support those enterprise level change efforts of all types, not just assigned to a single project. And they may even be responsible for initiating or supporting continuous improvement efforts as well. So that's one model. Another is to have it aligned in part of a project management office, so that you have part of that project management office includes members of the team who are certified or well-versed in change methodology, and that they are there to support specific projects as assigned, and they work really closely with project managers to support them. And then another model is just kind of that piece of organizational development overall, and supporting that through, I'm sorry, we've got somebody standing at the door. I'm on a meeting. That, just letting them know that at an HR level, it's going to be a little bit different. What I've observed is that folks that are at an HR level are generally working on things like policies and how those are going to be implemented, and perhaps also supporting strategic plans for an organization. Then finally, I just wanted to talk about that bit of, that, excuse me, hold on just a second. No, really, I can't talk. Okay, thank you. Sorry for that. The staffing levels based on the size of the organization. So how many staff you have, and where you might place things, and really revolves around the size of your organization, the amount of change that you might experience, and how quickly, and the complexity of the change that you might experience. We've kind of done the separate office here at DMV, so we're not directly connected to the PMO office. We support it, but we also support all the other enterprise level initiatives that are going on. So next slide. So I talked earlier about knowing when you need external support. So one of the things you need to understand is you need to understand your culture. And I know that most of you have heard the line, right? Culture will eat strategy for breakfast. And, you know, Peter Drucker said that, and it doesn't mean that strategy is not important. It's just that they're both equally important. And that if you have an empowering and powerful culture, that it's a really much surer way or route to success. So understanding your culture is not so easy, especially if you're part of that culture. And this is one of the places where an external consultant can really come in and do that culture assessment and identify what are the strengths and the challenges for your culture that might impact the change initiative. So this is one reason why you might want to bring in an external agent to do that work, even if it's only that work, right? Then the other types of things that you really need to consider are, you know, what's the amount of disruption to people? How large of an area are you affecting? Is this something that's going to matter to both your internal employees and to your partners and your customers? Again, thinking about that history, where have you been with past efforts? And what's the level of expertise that you have within your own resources? So these are all some things to consider, and you really just need to look at that from a risk perspective. And again, there are some tools out there on ProSide that can really help you with identifying when it's the right time to bring in a third-party vendor to support your change effort. And luckily here at the state of Oregon, we have a mandatory price agreement that we can all use now. It's a much easier lift in trying to bring those resources on board. So the next slide, I'm just going to go over what we had at DMV and what we had then when we started out and what we have now. So then we, initially we're here to support our service transformation program, which was the implementation. It was a 10-year project. Major lift of it was implementing a new technology system, which we've done. And then there is the leveraging of that system. So we've been doing that work since then. Kiosks will be coming up next. And so kiosks will probably kind of really, that and maybe a queuing system for our lobbies will kind of complete our service transformation program work. But the meatiest part was that software implementation, the COTS implementation. Then we, the criticality and the size of the project really, drove that we needed to have 2 to 3 folks full-time, including my position. And then actually we just, we're using rotational in addition to that. So we started out with my position, which is a PEM-E. We had a communications lead, which was a public affairs specialist 2, which ended up being really the need for 3 at that level. And then we had organizational change analysts, and we started out with 1, and we were going to go with 2 rotationals. We quickly realized that we needed to shift to the 2 permanents to the 2 rotationals to one of them as a permanent and one as a rotational. And the reason why we did rotational was that we really wanted to bring this back out into the organization. So we wanted to have people to have the opportunity of going in and out. Hold on just a second. I'm really sorry.
I'm presenting.
Thank you. Sorry for that. And then we did have our external change consultants, and they brought, they were full-time. They were here. They actually were in the building with us, and they had 2 to 3 individuals at any one time to support us. And they did that culture assessment and were really valuable. And then next slide. So what do we have now? Well, what we heard from our executives was that they didn't want this team to disband and be, sent out around the organization. They wanted them to stay whole. They found the value that was there from us having dedicated staff, and they knew that there was much work yet to do. So we became part of a new program or team, stakeholder engagement team, and our focus is really in supporting and engaging with both our internal and external partners. So we don't have any external consultants with us any longer. We're doing all that work ourselves. And we have the dedicated change communications team. So again, myself, we have now public affairs specialist 3 as a communications lead, since that's so important. And we have 3 full-time positions that are currently still at Opal 1s. However, their positions are being reviewed because the work that they're doing now is that higher level work. Previously, that was the right classification because we had an external consultant coming in and they were doing the leading and brought that expertise. However, part of our contract was also transferring skills and knowledge, and that has been done successfully. And so we're looking at that in terms of a classification shift. So all of them are ProSci certified, and we are busy. So I think the last slide that I have is, what are we doing? So we really are supporting all the work the change efforts that are being done here at DMV. We're working with legislative implementation teams, project teams, those kind of efforts that get stood up and no one really identified them as something official. So kind of those expedited things that happen. We are really focusing on what this display is that you're seeing here is kind of our network, what we do. So we interface with all of these entities and we leverage all of these entities as our change network. So these are the people that are going to be able to help us. So something that's going on might have power users or the need for testers and trainers. So we're making sure that we leverage and work with those groups on the change events. Definitely our sponsors. I meet every month with all of our executive sponsors, which is the entire DMV exec team, individually, each one, and I prepare a sponsor roadmap of all the things that we need their visible and active support on throughout the coming month. Been doing that for 6 years. And then we have a body of change agents. So we have a dedicated change agents, and the management team here at DMV wanted to keep them alive and going well. And we have anywhere from 75 to 80 people attend a monthly meeting where we provide resources, activities that we need their assistance with, and then we're working with them all throughout the month through little focus groups or drop-in sessions or one-to-one conversations as needed. So that's kind of our structure of our change network and how we utilize and work with all of these folks. I would just kind of end this with there's the hard factors and the soft factors of change management. So some of those hard factors would be the technology, the systems, the plans, the reports, the formal organizational structures, working environments, processes, tasks, the elements that exist. But then there's the people part, and that's the soft culture, the soft factors. So that organizational culture that we talked about, leadership styles, informal relationships that actually help get work done. We all know that there's process, and then there's the informal way that things get done around the organization. The qualifications and skills and abilities of people, the social interactions, that the whole collaborative teamwork, that's all the soft stuff. And that tends to be the harder stuff to manage. So anyway, that's what we do. That's how we did it. That's how we stood up our office, and I'm happy to answer any questions. One of the things that I have this understand your audience up there next as if you're ready to have these kinds of conversations with your managers, your execs, then listen carefully to the information that Karis is about to share with you and think about them as potentially not resistant to change or resistant to the idea, but but asking a lot of questions. And so what might you interpret from the questions that they that they ask you. She'll give you some advice on that. So I just open it up to any questions that folks might have. And if there are none, we can turn the time over to Karis.
Feel free to type your questions in the chat, folks. At any point that you have a question, just throw it into the chat. We'll see it and bring it up. I don't see
Thank you so
any
much,
there right
Karis,
now.
for driving. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. I think I jumped the gun a couple times. Sorry about that.
No worries. I was watching 3 different slide decks, so I probably didn't notice.
Okay, well, there's also going to be, well, provided I don't talk the entire next hour, there will be time at the end for questions if you think of some for Lisa or myself. So the second part of our presentation, as Lisa said, is regarding resistance management, which is my super all-time favorite thing to talk about ever. There is a good chance that a lot of you have seen this presentation in one way or another, whether it was a training that I gave at your agency or at the Champion Network group, or if you saw, we have some OCM videos up on Workday Learning, which are about 10 minutes each. I'm plugging that. So if you are like, man, I really want to teach my team about OCM, we have, I think, 13 little mini OCM videos on various topics in Workday Learning, and I highly recommend those. So, okay. Also, I tend to talk really fast when I get excited, so please feel free to write in chat at any time to slow down. I'm going to try to be calm and collected during this presentation, but I get very excited talking about resistance management. So if you know me, you know that I always have to have humor or a little meme in my presentation. So this cute little koala, right, is like, but we've always done it this way. And if you haven't heard this throughout a change that you've led, that is shocking to me. This is one of the most common things that I hear when we're introducing a new change is, well, we've always done it this way, or the way that we do it now works just fine, right? And so it's important to remember that just because something has always been done a certain way doesn't mean there isn't room for improvement. That being said, you also should not instigate a change just for the sake of change. People really hate that. There needs to be a good reason for the change. So we will start off by talking about what is resistance. So resistance gets a really bad rap, and it's not inherently a bad or negative thing. It can manifest in negative ways and bad behaviors, but resistance itself is not a bad thing. And dare I say, resistance is actually a great thing, because that means that you have an engaged workforce. It means that someone read your communication and didn't like it and was willing to say something about it, right? So resistance is a sign of engagement, okay? It is a natural reaction to change. There is a video that I don't think I'm going to show now, but I can send to Tim after the meeting and send the link to you. And it's just a quick, like 3, 4, maybe it's 5-minute video. And she, I believe, is a neuroscientist talking about how change affects our brain and how it stops our brain from being able to predict, and how at like a very cellular level, that's what has kept us safe, right? Evolutionarily, is being able to predict things. And so when that ability to predict what's coming is taken away from us, like instantly, biologically, we're just like, oh my gosh, what just happened, right? Like it's a very, very natural reaction to resist a change, okay? And it's something that we should always expect when we are leading change. And it's something that we should always address when we are leading change. If any of you have taken the ProSci certification, well, I guess I took mine a long time ago, so maybe they stopped comparing it to cockroaches, but when I was getting my certification, they compared resistance to cockroaches. So if you see one cockroach in your kitchen, there is a good chance that there are a lot more cockroaches that you can't see behind the walls, right? So if you have one employee who is willing to voice their resistance, there is a really good chance that you have a lot more employees who are equally as resistant. They're just not voicing it. So ignoring the resistance is kind of like ignoring the cockroaches, and the problem will almost definitely only get worse. So I like this quote by Atul Gawande. He says that human interaction is the key force in overcoming resistance and speeding change. So that is one of the main things that I want you to take away from this. And there's lots of fancy words for it, and we're going to get into it. But essentially, it's being a human being and talking to people. That is one of the best ways to help combat resistance, okay? We'll get a lot more into that in a little bit. Also, feel free to ask questions at any time as well. You can either raise your hand or put them in chat. I like to answer them like as we're talking about the topic. So, okay, this is an opportunity for you guys to participate a little bit and play. I want you to type either A, B, C, or D in the chat. What do you think is the #1 reason that people resist change? Is it change fatigue, which is just there's way too much change happening at the same time? Is it comfort with the status quo? So you're just happy with the way things are? Is it peer pressure? So a lot of your peers are also resisting the change, or is it fear of the unknown? Lots of fears of the unknown being yes, yep, and a couple comfort with the status quo. Yes, nice. Oh, we got 1 for change fatigue. So these are all reasons that people resist change. I was taught that a bit of all of them play a role. Absolutely, yeah. Very rarely will you find that someone is resisting a change for one and only one reason. But, and I know, I just realized, I've given this presentation so many times, and I just realized that I kind of led you astray with the fear of the unknown just a bit ago with that neuroscience talk. We'll say that that's #2. So the #1 reason that people resist change is comfort with the status quo. So if people are happy with the way that things are now, or at least content, right? They understand what they have to do. They don't have to think about it. There's no real work involved. It's on autopilot, whatever their current process, tool, procedure is, right? It's really, really difficult to get people to want to do something new, because that takes a lot of work and effort to unlearn this behavior that you no longer even have to think about, right? To learn this new behavior, right? So comfort with the status quo is what I have seen and what I have read is the most common reason that people resist a change. So, but there are, even if not happy, they are comfortable to complain. Yep. See, so like I said, like they don't even have to necessarily be happy. It's just they don't have to think about it. Whatever it is, maybe they don't enjoy doing it, but they don't have to think about it, right? They've done it so many times, it's just second nature. So there are lots of other reasons why people resist change. These are just a few of them, and there's many, many more not listed here. I'm guessing that you all have resisted a change at one point or another, personal or professional, for any of these reasons. You'll notice that fear is up there a lot, right? Fear of the unknown, fear of job loss, fear of public perception. We definitely have that here with the state of Oregon. Nobody likes waking up and seeing a bad article in the Statesman's Journal, right? Then, of course, there's other things like that, change fatigue that we talked about, distrust in leaders, lack of communication. What I want you to take most from this slide, though, is that resistance is something personal and subjective, right? So I heard this at a conference a while back that was like, you don't get to decide for other people what is traumatic for them, right? So something that's traumatic for me may not be traumatic for any of you. And so you're all confused as to why I would be so upset about something, right? And as people leading the change, right, we are usually more intimately involved. And so automatically we have more facts, we have more communication, we know more about what to expect, right? And so it's easy for us leading the change to think, how can everyone be so upset about this? Like, it's really not that big a deal. Why don't they understand, right? Well, you need to remember that they don't have the same knowledge you do being part of the project team, and that you don't get to decide for someone else what is traumatic for them. So resistance is very personal and it's very subjective, and your beliefs, your past experiences, your current job satisfaction, you know, with your duties or your expectations, your experiences with past change or experiences at all in life, all of these things play into why a person may resist a change. So I just really want you to remember that moving forward, because it can be really difficult and obnoxious to manage resistance, especially if you believe in the change. And if the person who is being resistant is doing it in a super negative way, right? So I do want to make sure you understand that managing resistance is a very difficult thing to do, because it takes being willing to be vulnerable and have a real conversation and be a real person with someone and talk about feelings, right? And even for me, right, like I live in this world, I love doing this, and I have a psychology major, it's still very, very difficult, and I get it wrong all the time. I think that's what it is to be a human being. You just get things wrong all the time. But your intentions are hopefully good, right? And you're making this connection with this other person who's being resistant. Okay, gotta take a breath. I'm talking too fast. Everybody good? Any questions yet?
There are a
Okay,
couple
if
of
the
things
reason-
coming through the chat. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So if the reason for a change is explained, then it no longer is unknown. D comes up more when the reason for the change is not explained. Yes, D was D, fear of the unknown. Yes. So that's totally right, Charles. Again, that fear of the unknown, right? Because we want to be able to predict what's coming because it makes us feel safe, right? So back in the olden days, like if I wasn't sure what was over that hill or what was in that cave, I was not taking another step, right? So we still have that part of our brains, this like fight, flight, or freeze. And when we cannot predict what's coming, that turns on and we're like, wait, I don't want to do this. I don't understand this. I don't know what's coming. I can't predict what's coming. Like, I don't like this, right? So that's exactly right. And in the absence of information, people like to make stuff up in order to explain what they see happening. Absolutely. We do that as human beings because we are so uncomfortable with ambiguity, just like as a species, right? That we start to fill in the blanks. And most of the time, we don't fill it in with super positive stuff, right? I think a lot of us, I know I do this, is we fill it in with the worst possible scenario, because for me, it makes me feel like, okay, I can plan that if the worst possible thing happens, right, then I'll be ready for it, right? So that's exactly right, Lisa, that people will make up their own stories, and usually they're not great ones. Even if it is explained, it may not have been experienced before, so there may still be an unknown for them. Yes, you guys are brilliant. I don't even know why I'm here. Yes, that's totally right, Regina. So just because, you know, what this reminds me is, I saw a quote not too long ago that said, like, just because you love me doesn't mean I feel loved by you, right? So just because you sent a communication doesn't mean people understand what the change really means, right? So that's kind of what I think of when you say that, Regina. Just because you explained it, right? That doesn't necessarily mean that fear is going to go away if it's still a new, unknown, scary thing. So, okay, what's the next slide? The explanation of the why is distinct from the explanation of the what. Yeah, right. So the what is like factual stuff, and the why is like psychological stuff, right? Like, why do we have to do this? Why are you asking me to do this? Why is this important, right? Why is this the chosen product, right? So that's also a good point. Okay, there is also a good chance that you have seen this before in a previous training, but even if you haven't seen it, my guess is that it will look familiar to you. So when I was at ODOT, we created a big OCM series for all of our managers and supervisors. We were getting ready for the HCM implementation. And so our director at the time actually mandated this training for all managers and supervisors. he was very, very supportive of OCM, as Lisa mentioned. So it was great that we had that. And one of the things in that training was what we called the change curve. So each of these phases represent a different emotion. You can probably guess that what most of these are. So the first one is denial. Then we move to frustration, then depression, then this experiment stage, and then finally this decision stage. So the change curve is really a tool to help people diagnose what resistant mindset or feeling, right, a person may be exhibiting when they are faced with a change. So these are, like I said, the emotions or feelings that people can experience during a change. And you may notice, right, that this curve looks a whole lot like the Kubler-Ross 5 stages of grief. And that is because in the field of organizational change management, we tend to view a person going through a change as if they are going through a loss, right? Because they are technically losing whatever is in their current state in order to move to the future state. So it turns out that naturally people experience many of the same emotions and feelings during a change as they do when they grieve, right? And not all people, right? Again, people are very different on the spectrum of change. Some people really thrive on it. They view it as an opportunity for growth and learning, and it's just very exciting for them. And, you know, other people like me are way over here, and we really don't like change because we're type A control freaks who really like to know what's happening at all times because we have this illusion of control, right? So the people over in this camp with me definitely go through this change curve like a lot. So, and we definitely grieve the loss of whatever the current state was to get to the future state. And this happens even when the change is something like basically positive, something that they wanted, right? So I think of my sister-in-law. They were moving a few years ago, and they had talked about moving for years. They wanted to move so badly out of the house that they were in, out of the neighborhood that they were in, get the kids in a better school. And so, you know, it finally came time. They put the house on the market, they sold the house, and my sister-in-law was like devastated, right? Because she realized, like, I'm losing my neighbors. Like, I have a community here. I hate packing. Like, you know, I hate unpacking. We're gonna have to make all new friends. Like, it's super overwhelming. And so even when the change is a positive one that they actually wanted, you can still go through all of these different phases of resistance to the change, mostly because it's a lot of work. Change is a lot of work. It's exhausting. So, the other thing to remember about this change curve, right? Because I know it looks linear, right? Like someone will start in denial and then they will definitely be upset next. And then like after you have a talk with them, you know, maybe you could get them depressed, right? Like it looks like it's linear and everyone is going to hit those stages, but that is not the case at all, right? So it's more like this slide. And I think of a pinball machine, right, where employees they don't move in a straight line. Like emotions are not linear. There's no like calculated, like, here's how, you know, people move through emotions. That's not how it works, right? So they can move in and out of these resistant mindsets at any time. And as more information comes out, right, and that changes the change, they can still go, you know, from one phase to another. So even if you get someone to maybe this experiment phase where they're like, okay, I think I'm going to give this change a go. Maybe it won't be the worst thing that ever happened to me, right? And then, you know, you send out an email like, oh, by the way, this new system that we're, you know, implementing requires 3 weeks of 8-hour trainings every single day. And the person is like, no. Like, there's no way I'm doing that, right? And so they fall back into a different resistant mindset, right? So just because you have maybe someone in one camp doesn't mean that when you send out another communication, they won't go back to a more resistant camp. And so it's our job as leaders of change and business analysts helping lead and implement change to assess where our employees are at at any given time during a change and be ready to implement a remedy to help move them out of that resistant mindset into a more experimental decision type mindset. And I am going to go over, most of these are probably pretty self-explanatory, right? Like denial is basically, I don't believe the change is going to happen. I'm going to ignore it, head in the sand kind of thing. Frustration and depression, those actually, everyone after denial requires the person to actually believe that the change is happening, right? So you're not going to get someone frustrated or depressed or in this experiment or decision stage until they really believe that the change is happening, right? So frustration is, okay, I know this change is happening and I'm super, super mad about it, right? Or depression, I know this change is happening and I'm pretty much heartbroken about it for various reasons, right? And the depression, that's more like, I don't think I can do this. I'm not good enough. Like, I'm not smart enough to use this new system. I've never used a computer before. Like, I can't do it, right? Or maybe the system that's being replaced is something that this person built, right? It was a homegrown time tracking system. And now the Workday payroll and time tracking system is coming in and replacing what this person spent the last 25 years of their life doing, right? And so they feel, undervalued or underappreciated. The experiment stage, this can be both a good and bad thing. Surprise, this is not always a good thing. So the good experiment is like, okay, maybe this new tool, system, process, can help save me time or help me in this area or whatever. The bad experiment stage is when you have people saying, oh yeah, definitely, like, I'll try your new system. Yeah, I can't wait to get in there and break it and show you why it's a piece of crap and we never should have implemented this, right? So that is the bad side of the experiment phase. And I don't know how many of you have read Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger, but the whole premise of that book is that Holden wants to save these kids from running off the cliff, right? And essentially losing their innocence, not dying, but losing their innocence. It's a metaphor for like growing up, right? And I look at this experiment stage like that, right? Like people here are super vulnerable because they're either going to go into the system and try to prove themselves right about why it sucks, or they're going to go into the system with these high hopes, trying to prove to themselves that they were wrong, right? Like, I shouldn't have been so worried about this. It's going to be okay. And if it's not okay and the system, they get in there and they can't do what they want to do, or they're not able to do what they thought they were going to be able to do or whatever, right? This experiment stage is a really vulnerable place for people because then they can super easily fall back into one of those more resistant mindsets of denial, frustration, or depression. And so usually this is where I tell people to think like, okay, you're holding Caulfield and you're grabbing people before they run off the cliff, right? And they just give up on the project altogether, right? So this experiment stage is where you want to like maximize support, maximize resources, make sure you're answering these FAQs, helping people with training. Whenever you can, you want to get people into a system here to practice, that kind of thing. So this, I want you to think of the change curve as the what, right? So we talked about how the what and the why are completely different things when you're discussing a change. The what and the why are also completely different things when you're talking about resistance to a change, okay? So this change curve is the what. What are people feeling? Are they feeling, frustrated? Are they angry? Are they sad? Like, are they cynical? What is it, right? The next thing is the why. So it's pretty easy to figure out what a person is feeling based on their behavior, but the why is a lot harder to figure out, mostly because people don't usually just come out and say it, right? They'll say something like, well, this project is stupid, or this project wasn't thought through, or the people leading this don't know what they're doing, right? Those are like scratch the surface, like Band-Aids, right? I got a Band-Aid on my finger, like covering up a big, deep, nasty, gaping wound of resistance, right? So that's what AdCar is for. And I know you all know what AdCar is. I believe Jennifer went over it in the first part of our series, but I'm gonna go over it rather than going over like definitions. I'm gonna explain AdCar through a real change, which I know you're going to be shocked that I'm using this one, but we're going to do a time tracking replacement project, okay? So the first A in AdCar is awareness, and this actually is a linear process, right? This is ProSci's linear process that shows how individuals move through a change, right? And you have to hit each step in order to really, really progress to the next step, okay? And FYI, right, so we talked about this a little earlier, that just because you love me, right, does not mean I feel loved by you. Just because you communicated something doesn't mean I understand what's going on, right? So you may get to a stage later on where you're in training and you think that you're in, you know, the knowledge or ability phase, and all of the people who come into your training are super confused and don't understand anything about the change. You're like, okay, we need to go back to awareness, right? Because we cannot get people to this knowledge ability piece if they don't have this foundational awareness, okay? So just know, and you'll be able to tell like if people are really moving through these stages or not, okay? So awareness is the first one. This is where you would send communications, right, about the time tracking system. So you would send out an email that talks about what the project is, why the current time tracking system is being replaced, who is leading the project, where can people go to have their questions answered? Is there a project website? Do you have an FAQ? Is there a project email box that people can send questions to, right? When is this change happening? Will there be training? That's a lot of stuff, right? And you don't need to send it all in the first initial email, but you have to build all of that awareness before you can really progress with the project, right? So that's the awareness piece. Next comes desire, and this is always a tricky one because we just talked about how, I won't say very little, but like at least half the people out there don't really like change. They don't want to do it. They don't have a desire for it. They want to just keep doing what is natural and comfortable and easy for them, right? Because we all have a lot going on, like outside of work, like a lot is going on in our brains all the time. And so change is just one small piece, right? So getting people to want to partake in your change is usually one of the most difficult pieces because you're trying to play to, you know, like what would make life easier for them. What about this new system, tool, process, whatever is going to be beneficial for this individual, right? Or this team, you know, this division in the agency, you know, the state of Oregon as an enterprise, right? And so there's layers, right? It's like peeling an onion. There's lots of layers, right, that you can appeal to for why someone would want to be excited about, about your change, okay? Another thing to remember about desire is that some people have told me, they're like, well, I do stuff now that I don't like doing, so you don't tell me you have to have desire. And that's true. I do stuff now that I don't like doing either, right? But you do them because you have a desire to keep your job, right? So at like the very worst, you will get desire in people if they want to keep their job, right? Now, obviously you want to play up to other desires beyond just simply that, but you should know that. Like people may tell you that they don't want to do it and nothing you can say will make me want to do it. And it's like, well, okay, right? Like, and sometimes, again, this is where you have to have a really difficult conversation. It's like, if this new system, tool, process, whatever is antithetical with your current belief system or your values, like that's something you need to decide for yourself. And if you really do not have a desire to participate in this, then it may be in your best interest to find another position elsewhere that better aligns with your values and beliefs, right? So a lot of resistance management, if I haven't already said this 85 times, is having difficult conversations and being empathetic and being vulnerable and being a human being, right? And communicating. So the next phase is knowledge. And I actually like to talk about knowledge and ability at the same time because these used to really, really confuse me, which looking back on it, I don't know why, because they're totally different, but it's fine. So knowledge is thinking about like, hey, what is in my brain? What do I know about this project? What have people communicated to me about, you know, this new time tracking system, right? It may even be, hey, I've seen a couple demos of this new time tracking system. I've seen a couple one-pagers, you know, I've seen a few screenshots. Like, I understand, like, conceptually what I'm supposed to do when I get into this system. You know, I'm going to go enter my time and, you know, request my leave and whatever, right? So think about it, though, like, I use a really extreme example here because I'm a very extreme person. So let's say that I read like 20 books on how to fly an airplane, right? I have all the knowledge, I've seen the pictures, like, you know, I aced my test, like I could, you know, spout off any facts about the airplane that I'm about to fly, but I've never once flown the airplane, right? Like not even in a simulator, but I like aced all of my tests. Like I know everything in my brain, right? How many of you are gonna get into the plane with me, right? And let me fly you somewhere? Hopefully none of you, because we would die, right? So that's the difference between knowledge and ability. Knowledge is like what's up here, and ability is actually transferring that knowledge out through your fingertips to do the thing, right? To, you know, enter time in the new system, to request your leave, right? To submit your time if that's what the time tracking system requires, right? So that's the difference between knowledge and ability. Knowledge is like information share, right? The person is absorbing this information. Ability is like taking that information and, you know, taking it out of their brain. I literally think of like all the information, like a light, just like all the way down my arms, out through my fingers and doing the thing, right? So this ability piece, in a dream world, all changes, especially ones that are like new system upgrades, you would have like a playground or something where you can go into a practice environment of this time tracking system and, you know, very low risk, basically no risk because it's a playground, start like entering your time and like seeing how it works and, you know, making errors that don't cost you like, you know, a few hours of work or whatever, right? So that's the dream, right? And you don't always get your dreams. They don't always come true for various reasons. So it's really important, like so important. If you are not able to provide that much practice of ability, right, for employees, you need to understand that when you go live with this new system, tool, or process, that they have not had much practice and they're essentially going to be practicing for real, right? It's like a practice, but with real risks, okay? So we have to maximize empathy here, okay? We have to let people make mistakes. Yes, it's super frustrating. We may have to go back and make corrections, but these people haven't had a chance really to practice this yet, okay? And so we have to be understanding of that, because a lot of people, I would be one of them, I would be freaking out going into this new system thinking, oh my gosh, if I don't do this right, like I'm not going to get my vacation and I already bought the ticket, right? Of course, that's the first place I go because I like live to go on vacation. But oh my gosh, if I don't enter my time right, like I'm not going to get paid what I should get paid, right? And I have a mortgage to pay for, right? So it can be really scary for employees to jump into this ability piece in the real live environment. And often that's what happens. So just try to have a lot of empathy for people if that's how your project rolls out, right? And again, because of money, constraints, resources, whatever, a lot of times that's just what happens. And we just have to be, you know, accepting of that and understanding of people. The last one is reinforcement. So this one is really important because let's say, again, in this time tracking system, right, that the previous way that you entered time was to write it down on a piece of paper and hand it into your manager, right? And let's say you as the manager continue to let people do that, right? So you're undermining all of the progress that was made, right? This awareness building, the desire, knowledge, ability, the training, rolling it out, right? And if you continue to let people have this workaround, then you're undermining all of the work that went into the change. So, and if enough managers and people do that, then the change fails completely, right? And that is the worst. So reinforcement is super, super important. Reinforcing with managers, hey, these are our expectations of employees in the future state. Here is why this is so important. Don't forget the reason that we did this to begin with. Like, here are the benefits that we're going to reap if we do this correctly, all that stuff, right? Okay, how are you doing? You guys good? Okay, so as I said, the change curve is the what. I want you to think of AdCar as the why. So my brain, I just add a Y to the end of that because it's all an acronym anyway. So I just add Y in my head, right? Change curve is the what, AdCar is the why. So It's our job, as I mentioned, as change leaders to figure out both the what they're feeling and why. Why are they feeling this way? So are they in denial because they don't have awareness of the change, right? They have deleted every email that came out about the change because they thought this will never happen. I don't have to care about it anyway, right? Are they frustrated because they have no desire to make the change? They're really happy with the way things are right now. They are the current subject matter expert for the current time tracking system. They don't want to learn a new system, right? Or are they frustrated because they are about to retire and learning a new way to enter time for 1 month seems ridiculous, right? Are they in this depression stage? Again, maybe because they were the resident expert and now they feel like they're just being replaced by this new shiny tool, right? So in talking to people, and we're gonna go into that next about how we approach people who are being resistant. You're looking and listening for what. Again, that's usually pretty easy to pick up on. It's the why that is a little bit more challenging, okay? So, like I said, I need to have some humor. So I know it can be really frustrating when people are being resistant, especially if you are the one leading the change, or if you are the one who helped propose this new solution and you are super behind it, right? It can be really frustrating when people are being resistant. Even when you had nothing to do with the solution, right? It can still be really frustrating when people are being resistant because you're like, I'm trying to do this good thing for people. Like, can't you just get on my side, please? Right? So, and what can happen often is when someone is being negative towards you or attacking you, right? Our first instinct, right? Fight, flight, or freeze is to be defensive back. So if you have one person being defensive and then you're being defensive, there is zero communication happening, zero, okay? And if you are not communicating, you will never help this person get out of their resistant mindset. So instead, right, you don't want to fight the fire with fire. You want to fight the fire with what we call empathic listening. It's also known as empathetic listening. Empathic is just, I think, a bit more of this holistic, really trying to gather the body language, the feelings of another person, right? It's you are listening with your entire being to what this person is saying, okay? So it is listening to understand, right? You are seeking to understand what the other person is saying without passing judgment. Now, I know that is a ridiculous thing to say because just to be human, right, we make a judgment of every single thing that comes into our brain. But there is this awesome thing that we have, which is a filter, and we don't have to say these things out loud that we're hearing ourselves say in our heads, right? So don't pass your judgment on the person, because as soon as you pass that judgment, the other person is going to stop talking and get more defensive, right? So you're listening for the feelings and emotions, like I said, the nonverbal cues, the body language. And I know in this remote world, that's a little bit more difficult, but I mean, look at me, I'm right? You can still see all the body language, right? So you can still pick up on it, even in a remote world. Another part of this empathic listening is reflective listening. And this is extremely important, okay? If you do not check for understanding, make sure that you heard what that person said in the way that they meant to say it, right? Because how many times do things get lost in translation? And they say something and you hear it a way that they definitely didn't mean, right? But you interpreted it a certain way, and now you are offended or super mad, or now you're defensive, right? And then the communication stops, okay? So you need to check for understanding. Let's say they say something and you're just like, whoa, what did I just hear, right? So you would say, hey, Tim, you just said this, and I interpreted it this way. Is that how you meant it, or did I interpret it incorrectly, right? And a lot of times the person will be like, oh my gosh, I didn't mean it that way at all. I shouldn't have said it that way. This is what I really meant, right? And then you check for that understanding, and then you're back to communicating, right? None of this. You don't want this. This is bad, okay? And of course, it should be done with genuine curiosity and a desire to understand. So don't just pretend like you're listening and repeat a couple words, right? That's worse than just not talking to them, okay? Don't do that to people, all right? So anyway, the benefits of listening this way is you're building trust, you're fostering respect with this person, you're enabling this person to release some true emotions, to be themselves with you, to be vulnerable. You're creating a safe environment for this person. You know, I want you to think of how many times have you resisted something, right? Whether it was a professional change or a personal change. I resist basically everything. I want things to stay the same, which is ridiculous, but that's just how like I am, okay? And so every time I feel resistant towards something, I am 1000% justified in feeling that resistance, right? As is every single other person on the planet feeling their resistance. They feel 1000% justified in that resistance, right? I have a very good reason for feeling this way, right? These are all my concerns, and they are very legitimate concerns that I have, right? Most people are not being resistant to be jerks, right? Like they are not being resistant to make your day terrible, right? They legitimately feel like they have concerns and fears that are not being addressed, right? And this is why we talk to people, because we need to help these people like understand that their feelings are valid, okay? Their concerns are valid. People are entitled to feel what they want, and we don't get to decide what is traumatic for someone else, okay? So you're creating a safe environment, you know, you're showing compassion, you're like trying to have this like ultimate optimum understanding of another person. And I'm sure you can all think of a time when you were talking to a friend, a partner, a loved one, whatever, and they were really, really listening to you. Like that is just like one of the most loving, kind, respectful things that you can offer another person, okay? So it hopefully, empathic listening will uncover the root cause of the resistance, okay? Because this is stupid, which you will hear over and over again, is not a root cause, okay? There is something much deeper going on underneath that. And if we just dismiss people at this is stupid, we're not helping them at all. In fact, we've probably just made it 10 times worse, and they're going to go talk to their friends and say, this person who was leading the change just blew me off, and they don't care about, you know, they don't care about our concerns at all, right? So this is stupid, not a root cause. It's a cover up, right? Because they're not ready to be vulnerable with you just yet, right? They're like testing the waters by being obnoxious and telling you that what you're doing is stupid, right? And so we can either take that bait and get upset and be defensive, no communication happening, or we can say something like, what do you mean? Why do you think it's stupid? What's going on, right? And all of a sudden you've opened the lines of communication. You've opened the door for people to be vulnerable, right? So the last couple slides, I only have 3 more slides here. We're going to talk about what you can do or say if you see various signs of resistance, okay? So if you are talking with someone who is very much in denial about a change, right? Like they are sarcastic, they're cynical, you know, or they're just completely apathetic. They avoid talking about the change. They say things like, yeah, I'll believe that when I see it. Or, yeah, this is just another flavor of the month. Or one that I heard a lot, which was my favorite, was, we just have to wait out this director, right? Ugh. Anyway, so that's the person who's in denial, okay? So how would you respond? First and foremost, always and forever, empathic listening, okay? If you like shut someone down immediately, they are not going to come back to you. They are definitely going to keep being resistant, and they're probably going to get other people to be resistant with them, okay? So you want to ask them questions, clarifying questions. Why do you feel this way? What do you mean? Like, well, what have you heard? Or, you know, tell me more. Like, I want to know why you think this or why you feel this way, right? So after you have a conversation and you're a real person, right, and you're communicating with this person, try to make the change real for them, you know, like, well, hey, so I understand what you're saying, and, you know, I can even understand why, you know, you would say that it's just another flavor of the month, you know, some changes die out, but here's what I've heard about this change. Can I tell you what I know? Can I show you what I've seen, like what communications I've seen? Or, you know, they actually have a project page with some demos and it's kind of cool. Like, do you want to take a look at it? Right? So making the change real, sharing progress and communications, and if you're able to, explain the employee's role and importance during the change, okay? So with the instance of a time tracking system, like, yeah, this is what I know about it. I've seen a demo, and it's actually kind of cool because when you put your time in, like, it automatically calculates all your shift differentials. Like, it looks like it might be kind of cool, right? So just an example, but like, try to make it real for them, right? The next one, I'm going to go through these kind of fast because I want to make sure we have time for discussion. So frustration. This one is very easy to spot, right? People are mad here. They may try to sabotage the change. There's outbursts. You can be mad crying. Crying isn't just in the depressing stage. There's crying here too. I've done both. There's arguing or placing blame. This is more like, I will not participate in this. Like, I flat out refuse to participate in this change, right? So first of all, even before empathic listening, if this person is being irate, I mean like irate, and you feel like you may be in danger with this person, don't think that Karis wants you to talk to them, okay? That's not safe. Don't put yourself in an unsafe position. It is not your responsibility to fix someone else's resistance. It's your responsibility to be a human and be willing to talk to them. But if they're just being like absolutely ridiculous, like, don't put yourself in that position. You can maybe say something like, hey, I get you're really upset. Like, let's talk about this in a couple days, right? So if they are calm enough, you feel safe, right, in this conversation, first and foremost, always and forever, empathic listening, okay? So you're asking clarifying questions to get to the root cause. You are validating their feelings, okay? I promise you, I have been a resistor of everything my entire life, okay? And until someone validates my feelings, like, I'm gonna keep resisting 100% of the time, all right? I need you to validate my feelings. I am feeling scared for this reason. Can you please just validate that, right? So again, everyone who is resisting feels super valid in that resistance. They have reasons, they have their fears, they have things not being addressed. They want to make sure that someone is considering these things that will negatively impact them, right? Validate feelings, okay? Once calm, or if they're pretty calm, right, you can try to start explaining the benefits of the change, and then asking, sharing, like, here's how I would make the change. Like, if I was in your position, I might try and do this. Or you can even say, like, I'm a little concerned about the change for these reasons. And, what I did was I reached out to a member of the project team, and, I sat down with someone for about a half an hour, and they answered my questions. This is a big mistake that people make when it comes to resistance management. People think that if you just continue to throw facts at the person being resistant, that will solve the problem. Usually the problem is not facts, right? It's a feeling about a fact or a feeling about misinformation that they have. So to not address the feeling and just address the facts is a huge mistake, okay? And we like to, at least in the olden days, God, I hope we're done with that, but there was that whole don't bring your feelings to work crap, right? That's not possible because we're human beings, okay? And we have feelings, and we bring those to work, right? Because we care about our job. And in order to care about your job, you have to have the feeling of caring about your job, okay? So just get rid of the thought that, like, you can't have feelings about anything at work, right? It's just business, right? It's ridiculous. Stop thinking that, okay? So we have to address the feelings, all right? That's a lot of what resistance management is. Yes, of course, there's facts involved, especially if the facts that they have are incorrect, right? You need to make sure that you're, like, dispelling any rumors, right? Resistance management is about being a human being and communicating with someone on a, like, deep connected level, being vulnerable, letting the person be vulnerable with you, you being vulnerable with the person, having this human connection about a fear or a concern or, like a sadness that they're feeling about losing whatever is in the current state to get to the future state, okay? The last one, so depression. So this is, again, like people may feel irrelevant, undervalued, they disengaged. You may even see personality changes. This is instead of like, I won't do this. This is like, yeah, I can't do this. Like, I'm just going to quit, or I can't, like, I am not smart enough to figure this out, or I've done the same thing my whole life. Like, I built this system. I have 6 months to retirement. Like, I can't do this. I just feel like everything I've done the past 30 years is being erased, right? Like, this is actually really a very, very sad place, because you don't want anyone to feel that way, right? We don't want any employees to feel that way, that they're not valued or that they're irrelevant. That's horrible, right? So first and foremost, always and forever, empathic listening, okay? Please ask them why they feel this way, right? Engage them in conversation. Just be a person with them, okay? So you can spark motivation, show support. Like, hey, I've known you a long time, and like we have gotten through some crap in the past. Like, you can do this too. I know you can, right? And offer reassurance, bring this together. Like, I'm a little concerned about this, that, and the other, and let's just get through this together. Like, we can do it. Like, I'm right here with you, right? Highlight the strengths that they have, give quick wins, right? It's about being a person with this person, right? Change can be so scary. I just honestly, like, I'm not even sure what the biggest takeaway that I want is for you, but a lot of resistance management is just willing to be a person and talk to people about their concerns, right? And by the way, more often, I won't say more often than not, but there are often times where a person who is being resistant is actually right. Like, they are bringing up a super valid concern that we need to talk about, right? So this is why we don't just like ignore resistance, okay? One, because it may be super valid, something you should be thinking about for your project. And they're a person with feelings, and they're working hard, and we all deserve to like have our concerns, validated. So, like I said, I get really worked up when I talk about it. But I think that's the end. So, any questions about resistance management?
Give them about 2 or 3 seconds to see if anyone's typing, and then we'll just assume there weren't any. And while we're waiting, just want to thank Lisa and Karis again for being willing to put this together and come and present to the Bang group. Yeah, Lisa, everyone is taking a big breath. And thank you.
It's like I was yelling at you, sorry. I was yelling
I'm just
near
curious.
you, not at you.
I'm just curious how many people, might be in an organization that doesn't have dedicated resources, but is interested in, or trying to get dedicated change leadership, change management resources in your organization.
Yeah, so if you're in that boat, please either throw your hand up or put something in the chat. See Krista put her hand up. Unless that's because you have a question, Krista. If so, put something in the chat so we know the difference.
She took her hand down, so.
Okay, and in the interest of getting y'all out of here before 4:30, thank you for those of you that were able to stick around past 4 o'clock. I know that there are quite a few out there that end their work day at 4 o'clock. So thank you for sticking around if you weren't one of those. And let me see. I just want to give one quick little shout out from Bang, something I forgot to mention at the start, so I'm sorry to those that dropped off of the meeting earlier, but there will be another survey coming out soon specific to a business analyst mentorship program that Bang is getting started for everybody. So be looking for that. It will come with information, a one-pager, and other information about how we're going to be setting up that program. Working with the folks that do the mentorship through Ascent on that, getting that going. So be looking for that and that survey. And again, thank you, Lisa and Karis. This has been awesome. I'm almost kind of sad that this is the end of our series on change management, but with it being such an important topic, I think we have to allow it to come back around at some point. So don't be surprised if we get some people asking for you both to come back. And next forum in April, I'm not sure I have the topic title right. We're working on that still, of course, because it's like 2 months away. But Pamela Patterson is going to be coming and talking to us. She's a really good speaker about requirements elicitation in this remote world that we're in. I've seen that presentation from her and it's really good. So I'm excited for that content to come to this audience. I think we'll all get a lot out of that one as well. And I don't see any questions, just a ton of thank yous coming through the chat for you guys. So thank you very much. And we will have our newsletter out next month as usual. And then we will see you all again in April.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you both.
Take care, all.